we're out in the lobby, and this very hardy guy with a bright red beard at the time comes up to me, and he picks me out, and I'm sort of walking in the crowd, I'm minding my own business, and he picks me out, he says, "Have you put on tefillin today?" And I said, "What? What are tefillin?" And he said, now I had been bar mitzvah, but where I was bar mitzvah, there were no tefillin. I mean, this is not. And my father, when he was a boy, he had put on tefillin, I think, for the first 2 years after his bar mitzvah, but then he lost them, and it didn't. So we didn't have tefillin in our house. I didn't know from tefillin. I knew what was on those Marc Chagall paintings of rabbis, black boxes and stuff like that. I was about as clueless as those idiots on that flight who thought that the guy was putting on tefillin. One of the big arguments about that incident was that you should always fly El Al. They know how to diffuse the tefillin, so they won't. In any event, so Rabbi Schwartz, I said, well, I've never put on tefillin. I haven't put on tefillin today. I've never put on tefillin. He said, good, you want to put on tefillin? I said, why? He said, because it is said that I can tell from looking at you, you care about the peace of Jerusalem. And you want peace in Jerusalem. This is 1971. It's between wars. And I said, well, that's true. I have first cousins in Israel. He said, you can help the peace of Jerusalem if you put on tefillin. So I'm looking at my uncle and basically, get me out of here. And my uncle says, you should do it. And so very patiently, Rabbi Schwartz, because that's who it was, of course, and it was the first time in my life, and it was completely irrational. It meant something. I mean, it was an intense kind of moment. And the next day, and then I went home and I started reading all about phylacteries and what tefillin were, and that's the kind of person that I was and am. And I read about it, and the next day I asked my uncle, I said, do we have any tefillin in this house? And he found his old tefillin, gave them to me, and I tried to put them on myself. And it's really a mess when you don't know what you're doing, and but this was my point of entree to serious Judaism. And I am here, in a sense, to pay a debt from long ago. I cannot project how my life might have been different had I not been picked out of a crowd by a perfect stranger who I'd never met before, introduced himself as Schwartzy, and perceived, or at least took a lucky guess, that I was an intense-looking young man, and that I cared about the peace of Jerusalem, and that I would be a live one and a sucker for putting on these tefillin, and it changed my life. It's crazy, right? But this experience, it was literally less than a year after that I began keeping Shabbat fairly seriously, and less than a year, and I wish I could say that every single day of my life I have put on tefillin since that time. There are days when you're flying across the international date line and you're not on El Al, and there are other things, but I pretty much haven't missed. I've put on tefillin in cornfields in Iowa. I've put on tefillin in camping trips in British Columbia. It's connected me. And that's part of what the whole idea of tefillin is. And that's part of what the whole idea of the differences are that we were talking about. See how that's illustrated in this little homey example. We were talking about the difference between something that is novel and fresh and different and something that is very old. Tefillin is a very old thing. They found tefillin in archaeological sites. We were just in Israel. I took 125 listeners to Israel, came back Tuesday night of this last week. We were there. We had Purim in Hebron, and we had Purim. But look, you can see in archaeological sites, they have tefillin before the Common Era. And this is a very, very old thing. I know that my grandfather, may he rest in peace, put on his tefillin in the morning. This is a connection. It is consistent. Nothing novel about it. It was novel for me for a moment. But the idea of connecting with the past, something that isn't like last year's Oscar winner for Best Supporting Actor, something that is valid 200 years ago and 800 years ago and 1,000 years ago and will be valid 200 years from now and 800 years from now and 1,000 years from now. That is a beautiful thing and it's a powerful thing. And then the second level of contrast, and this is genius. You see, so many people believe in the entertainment industry. If you get up and you do a special We Are the World and you sing a song for Haitian refugees, or now it's going to be Chilean refugees, aren't you doing something wonderful? A lot of these people live broken lives, terribly broken lives. The lesson of tefillin, the lesson of the Chai Center is repair yourself first. Repair your life first. The small gesture, the small, tiny step in the right direction, that can have an impact on your life and on the whole world. The idea of connecting this small act of putting on tefillin for the first time, connecting that act with peace in Yerushalayim. It's so profoundly true. The strongest thing about Israel, and you can see it all over Israel, is the religious quickening that is going on there. The same kind of religious quickening that has been going on for years here among American Jews and that Rabbi Schwartz has been such a prominent part of.